It's not something that can be understood either. It's something else. Maybe it's something that's only experienced, that's not actually happening. But is it possible to only experience something and not have it be happening? Everything you experience, yes, is real in a way, yes, and you probably understand it too, in a way. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching Leaf by Leaf. Today we're talking about the great Nobel Prize winning Jon Fosse and his most recent book from Transit Books, translated by Damien Searles, A Shining. This is, in the words of William H. Gass about his last chapter in Omen Setter's Luck, this is a sneeze of a book. It's just a whisper of a book at a mere something like 50 pages. And the thing is that it could easily be written off. I recently saw last year with the highly anticipated The Mysteries from John Cage and the great Bill Watterson. So many people were turned off by its brevity. And I fear the same thing could easily happen with A Shining because of its brevity. Although, given the oeuvre of Jon Fosse and the brevity of most of the books, maybe people are used to it. But I think what the two have in common, The Mysteries and A Shining, in reader reception stemming from reader expectation, is that they both whisper quiet truths. And I think we're getting less and less able to take the time, or maybe I should say we are losing the tools or skills necessary to recognize quiet truths for one thing, and then to contemplate them for another. We need things loud, rapid. For example, when my daughter is watching the YouTube videos that she likes to watch, and these people, they are screaming at the camera. It's the best way. They're just yelling at the camera. And you realize that it's this intense, constant yelling and constant barrage of sound effects and image layovers that makes the videos almost cartoonish. And you realize they know that the bulk of people, because of attention spans, getting the attention and sustaining the attention requires us basically to regress back to cartoon antics. And you look at these channels and sure enough, they have millions of followers. Then you get a book like A Shining from Jon Fosse. And it invites us to a place we are not used to, we're not conditioned to apprehend, but that I argue we so desperately need. I don't think it's any coincidence that this book basically opens right up with someone driving out into the middle of a forest, getting their car stuck, and then wandering around trying to figure out how to get out. Fosse begins right off the first page by stripping this character of everything. He is driven out of the information barraged society and into the wilderness. And the wilderness, of course, is key. As most people know, Jon Fosse is a Catholic Christian, and there are explicit Christian elements in this book. In some cases, it almost reads like Samuel Beckett decided to convert to Catholicism and then wrote his next play. But this time, he wrote the play from inside the mind of one of the actors. There is also a clear allusion to that greatest of all Catholic poets, Dante. The difference between the Inferno and A Shining, however, is that we know exactly what got the character in A Shining into the middle of the dark wood. It was clearly boredom. Boredom is what drove him, literally. Well, boredom drove him, and then he drove a car that then got stuck in the middle of a dark wood. But as far as I recall, we're not told explicitly the exact thing that drove Dante to then awaken in the dark wood of error. We know that he lost his path, and in the same way, in A Shining, the character will lose presumably his path. And I say presumably his because, as far as I remember, the way that it's written, we're given no proper names, no pronoun for the protagonist. We're in his or her mind, and it is very much a monologue. In fact, the book is one unbroken paragraph of predominantly monologue. But this works really well to make the character, of course, adaptable and relatable to anybody who's picking up this book. There's a depersonalization where the usual or the expected markers of identity from today are stripped away so that something more universal can take hold and progress. And it's interesting that Fosse hits on boredom specifically, the same thing that drove David Foster Wallace in his final unfinished novel, The Pale King. But this stripping away of the current indicators and markers that we're used to is not disorienting like you would think it would be. Somehow it makes it more relevant. Fosse is, of course, the doyen of working with such little material, even though there are clearly sentences that are questions all throughout. They don't have question marks. There's very little punctuation except for the comma and the period. Stupidity is the biggest word here, which recalls that debate between William Faulkner and Ernest Hemingway. And I'm not sure if it's apocryphal or not, but Faulkner said something about Hemingway to the effect of, he's never known to ever drive any of his readers to consult a dictionary. And then Hemingway replied to the effect that, poor Faulkner, he thinks you have to use big words to express big emotion. And when you first start reading this book, the sentences are so simple, so short, so staccato, that you may have this thought that I'm not going to be able to do this for the duration of a book. But as with all of Fosse, he's so deceptive, so clever, so in touch with the fluidity of human thought that these sentences just naturally metastasize. Just as the dark wood, the forest in which the character is lost, seemingly metastasizes and spreads and loops back on itself, so too do the sentences which are mirroring the character's thoughts. And so there is a three-layered structure here that are all completely interconnected through mimesis. And while this three-level interconnected, interdependent, mimetic structure is in place to drive these thoughts through a simple, universal situation of getting lost, Fosse finds and places we, the readers, places us on this fulcrum between profound symbology or meaninglessness. The symbolism of getting stuck, losing one's path, following the light, versus the meaninglessness that derives from solipsism and madness. The character is constantly in an internal debate over whether the things he's seeing and hearing are really there or not. But then in the midst of all of this mortal headiness that thrums under the incantatory prose, we'll get moments of levity such as this. I look straight ahead, straight into the black darkness. It's like nothing's visible, only black darkness. I look up, straight up, and I see a black sky without stars, deep in the dark woods under the dark sky. I stand still. I listen to nothing. But that's probably just a figure of speech. And if there's one thing I need to avoid now, it's figures of speech. We get very few little moments of insight into this character's history. Everything is very much set in the infinite now. But the character will have a thought like this: love. Now, what do I mean by a word like that? Because if there's any word in the world that doesn't mean anything, it's that one. We know that this character lives alone, that if he were to die, probably no one would even notice. Love is absent from their life. And you can feel the character constantly getting locked in these dialectical, philosophical, logical, rational games the same types of things that trap Murphy and Watt. It's true that I'm deep in the dark woods, but I'm not trapped. I just can't find a way out of the forest, and obviously that's different from being trapped or locked in. Because in that case, there pretty much has to be someone who's locked you in. It can't be the person themselves who locks themselves in, or maybe it can be the person themselves. And if it's me who locked myself in, I didn't do it on purpose. I'm trapped totally against my will in the dark woods, involuntarily self-trapped, if you can put it that way. But that's just words and more words. And so you see how that moment, that quick little spark of existential philosophizing and reasoning quickly sinks into despair and even a devaluation of language. The character says, but it can't possibly be that there are two more people here who have gotten lost. And some of this knee-jerk reaction to things he's seeing or thinks he's seeing, it really expresses well that tendency of ours, especially when we're lost in that dark wood, that it's utterly, the situation is utterly unique to us, that we're alone in experiencing these things, that we are somehow uniquely suffering. Towards the end, the character starts to grapple with the possibility that there is a difference between an experience and reality, or rather something happening in this material realm versus an experience, which, if you can go there, is a sort of reality. And what it hinges on is understanding. And so Fosse seems to be setting up this proposition that experiences we have, which may not be tied to something in this temporal material realm, if it brings understanding, then that experience is just as real as anything we see here around us and that others witness as well. And towards the close, it's like everything is without meaning. And like meanings, yes, meanings don't exist anymore because everything just sort of is. Everything is meaning. This is where I think Fosse in this book, in A Shining, this is where he himself shines brightest. And it can be very difficult to articulate, which is why the language, the unique language, this incantatory, looping, folding prose that Fosse has struck out here for us and in so many of his other books. It's why it's so alluring and so powerful, is because Fosse has figured out a way to nonetheless use language to express these complex ideas. The thinking here is something along the lines of, what if everything was experience and everything was understood? If there weren't questions, if there weren't ambiguities, if there weren't dialectics, uncertainties, we would exist in a realm where meaning and understanding wouldn't be a concern or wouldn't be concepts at all, because everything is meaning, everything is understanding. And it can't be denied that what Fosse is expressing here without using the word is faith. Our character is beginning to come to terms with that event horizon, that if passed beyond the threshold of, if you step over that event horizon and into this shimmering light, this shining, it is to step into the realm of faith, which in the Christian Bible is an actual substance, not just a concept. It's something that can be given. It is something that is actually material. What makes this book so relevant for readers of all kinds is that there's this idea where the dark wood, the dark forest, and the shimmering light of the realm where everything is meaning and everything is understanding, to the point where those concepts don't exist anymore, these two realms rub shoulders with one another. In the end, what Fosse does so well in A Shining is he takes the concepts of consciousness, boredom, faith, meaning, understanding, and language, and in the most deceptively simple way, he gives us an allegory that doesn't help us to understand these things, but to experience them. I know the septology is all the rage, but please don't let the profound whispers from A Shining fall on deaf ears.